All right, welcome back to another WrightStew Podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
And I'm Brian Wright, and we're in Speaker Studio, making time when we have time to make it happen.
And you know what, Brian? It's Valentine's Day. So who better to be with than you? Well, actually, my wife, probably my wife and kids. Yeah,
well, I may be to the point where
I love you,
what
Brian,
you're saying
but
is accurate. So anyway, Valentine's Day definitely changes as you age, right?
Yeah.
Or it shouldn't. Maybe it shouldn't. I'll be honest. I'll speak for me. And so I remember being younger and like when you first get married or you're dating girls, whatever, and it was kind of a stressful, fun.
It was a big deal in high school. Like high school was a big deal.
Really big deal. You know, girls would have, I don't know if they still do this, have like roses and scent. Like if you've been dating a girl for a minute.
To the school.
And, you know, I kind of get to these things as I age. I become anti-made-up holiday.
Yeah,
So we have Valentine's Day that feels made up. President's Day feels made up. You know, there's just a lot of made-up...
Arbor Day.
Yeah, a lot of made-up holidays going around that don't feel like... I don't know, I feel like this is maybe Hallmark has done this in the background and been like, hey, you really need to celebrate... Even like birthday. I'm not a huge birthday guy, right? I feel like once you get to a certain age... And we weren't even as kids. Like, birthdays
are off the chain now compared to when we were kids.
Oh, dude. And my wife wants to make it really off the chain, right? They get, like, a gift for every year they've been born. I just had one turn 18, and so we're getting things. And so it's like, I don't know, dude. Holidays in general.
You like the Christmas, the Thanksgiving,
I like Thanksgiving,
Easter.
obviously, is big.
Yeah.
Easter, obviously, because of beliefs. Christmas... feels a little too much.
Wow, really coming in hot here.
Yeah, and so I would just say Valentine's Day, if you could just do it as a dinner with I don't like the expectations, right? I like I've got to lower expectations, and my wife probably is to that point now where she's like, maybe we go to dinner, maybe we don't.
How much lower can they get, Brian? No.
So anyway, that's on me. Again, there's a lot of weird things I got working in this mind that I keep to myself most of the time.
Let them out.
Because...
Let's be therapeutic. Let's share this with the nation, the world, really.
Yeah,
right?
the world. We're all over.
Yeah, worldwide. So I remember Valentine's as an elementary. So there's different kind of tiers. I feel so. Elementary school,
you get the little.
We just did this last night with my 7-year-old. We got the little princess cards, and you give one to each classmate. Maybe you build a box or like an envelope where kids can put them in.
Yeah.
Then you get to middle school. Hey, maybe there's a steady relationship.
Yeah.
And I remember at my middle school they did a thing where you could buy a carnation.
Oh yeah.
For like $1. Like at lunchtime, you could go buy a carnation and send it to. Friends, girlfriend, whoever it was. I think I got one in my middle school career, and I think it was from like a teacher who just
felt bad for you.
Probably, yeah, that sort of thing. This is one. So this one I will always remember. So this was sixth or seventh grade, and they did this thing, and this is like pre-internet, right? So 1990, 91. And you filled out this like survey, and it was things that you liked. So it was, these are the 4 groups: New Kids on the Block, Belle Biv DeVoe, MC Hammer, and Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
Just as an example, that was kind of one.
Right.
Which one
genres.
do you choose?
Yeah.
Hey, here's your football, baseball, basketball, or soccer. Yeah.
Okay.
Your interests, your likes. So I guess they had every kid in the school do it, and then you turned it in.
Okay.
And they had some sort of program that shared, hey, these are the people you best match up with, like the ones that would.
It's like a match website
it's
before
pre-Tinder, pre-whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, for like $1, you could go pay, and they would print out your name, and then like the top 10.
Did you do it?
Heck yeah, I did it. So.
How many people were on your list?
So they gave you the top 10, and then it gave you a percentage, and so the percentage of like. Matchness was probably just how many ever times you matched up with their answers, and it was probably 20 things they asked you about, whatever it was. So I remember I was like, oh man, maybe like all the good looking girls will be on my list, and I'll show it to them, and
they'll be like,
then they'll just fall head over heels, and
right, they just need a little bit of extra to take that step forward.
and I guess it was 6th through 8th grade, so it was the entire middle school. So like the top 3 people I didn't even know. And then here's the thing that really kind of blew me away that I didn't even consider. Like my 1 through 5 were all black girls. And I was like,
Makes sense now. Well, I mean, I've ridden with you in a car. If music and culture, that was kind of made sense.
Yeah, and I didn't.
Could have been some really good athletes come out of that too.
Yeah, well, I never. And again, like my parents were very, no racism, no anything like that.
Right.
Didn't grow up in that environment.
There is an anomaly. Yeah.
But in the late '80s, early '90s, that was like a mixed relationship. Jungle Fever had come out, and there was a lot of things that were. I don't say taboo, but just weren't happening, and
not as popular as they are now.
No, clearly not. And I'd never considered like
that is an option.
Dating a black person, a black girl. Like it just wasn't. And so I was like, maybe this is.
Did that open your eyes?
No, I was still. I wasn't like very outwardly like a romantic in middle school. I wasn't like trying to date anybody, but it did open my eyes to like, oh.
So how old were you when you had your first girlfriend? Like you would consider?
So 5th grade.
Okay.
Dated a girl, Melissa Bonifer. So Melissa, if you're out there, we were actually telling this story the other day to my kids. So in 5th grade, we moved from Northern Virginia to North Carolina.
Yeah.
She was my little 5th grade girlfriend at the time, and I thought I was pretty shy, not very outgoing.
Well, we've heard maybe your perception of yourself is not
maybe
accurate
it is.
Teachers.
I mean, I always had friends and stuff, but I wasn't like a class clown or anything like that. So anyway, Melissa, she was kind of a tomboy, right? So we were on the same t-ball team together, and anywho, we're boyfriend girlfriend. I literally told nobody that we were moving to North Carolina, and we moved over spring break. So the last day before spring break, my teacher made this announcement that, hey, everybody, Paul is leaving. When we get back from spring break, he won't be here. He's moving to North Carolina. And then the crowd was like, Paul, we're going to miss you. And I started crying. It was, I was a tender-hearted young man.
Yeah, still are.
Still are. Yeah, still am. And so word spread pretty quick that me and my little brother were moving.
Yeah.
And we walked to school. So it was about a mile walk. But you had crossing guards.
Yeah, you had to make sure you didn't get ran over or get
And so
captured.
she was like safety patrol.
Mm-hmm.
And so I walked past her every day to get home. And so
did you speak to her?
Well, so we're walking, and I remember vividly being about 20 yards out and seeing her like doing her duty as a crossing guard. I was like, oh crap, what am I gonna say to her? And I just kind of walked up, and she goes, why didn't you tell me you were moving? I was like, I don't know. That was my answer. And then she's like, well, will I ever see you or talk to you? I was like, I don't know. Yeah, very 5th grade answer, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, I gotta go. We're walking home. She's like, okay.
Ah. And you ever see her again?
No, never saw again. Never talked to her. Never. And so technically, we didn't break up.
And so it was nothing to fit. I mean, we didn't sign any documents. So it's not like we're married somewhere.
Yeah, we were joking around about it the other day with I forget what we were talking about with like at a family dinner, and I was like, technically, I'm still dating Melissa Bonifer, so I don't know what's going on around here. So if you are Melissa Bonifer or know her, hey, let her know we're probably broken up now.
Right, you moved on.
I've moved on. We had a good run, but did you have a first
girlfriend? I remember. I guess I had an older brother. I know you had a younger. So I remember having like a girlfriend or a girl that I called my girlfriend like 1st grade.
Mm-hmm.
Really young. Not really. You had somebody who called one. Then I remember 4th grade, like kind of real girlfriend. Like it didn't feel you wasn't necessarily comfortable talking in person, but we talked on the phone. And
what'd you talk about? Like,
I don't remember.
Class today was brutal, huh?
Yeah, I mean, we were just sharing each other's hearts, just kind of laying it out there, letting everybody, And so, and then, pretty real girlfriend, probably 7th, 8th grade. I feel like, and you tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like kids nowadays are a little bit more held off on that. Like, they're not into it. They have a much...
It's more like group setting sort of
thing.
Like they go in groups and And yeah, like because my kids went to the prom.
Yeah.
And it was always a big group together, and
yeah. So I do think it has changed. In some ways, I think this generation is much more mature in their eyes of seeing different things.
Well, the world's gotten much smaller.
And then in some ways, I think they're less mature when it comes to wanting those relationships. Maybe they've seen marriages, and maybe they've seen life. Maybe it's just how it is.
Well, they don't interact as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely
they interact digitally very well.
Yeah,
but in person, I've definitely seen and I see it with my own kids because I have one that's super outgoing and will talk to much more me. I have another one who's a couple that are much more Meredith, and the little one is much more back to me.
Gotcha.
And again, I think it's just everybody's wired differently, but there is some of that too.
Like I felt like most of the kids by the time they're in 7th, 8th grade had boyfriend, girlfriends. Maybe not for long periods of time. At least,
but somebody you called, somebody that
you go to dances and you would at least I would slow dance, right? I wasn't doing any of the fast stuff, right?
You weren't doing the electric slide.
No.
Looky.
So I feel like
do you know how to do the electric slide?
Well, I know
I've literally never done it.
I have done it, but it's not. It's at weddings, right? And it's probably weddings 10 or 15 years ago.
You were probably drunk.
Well, no, I would say, mostly sober at those events, right? You want to be able to remember them. But I would say that just from a cultural standpoint, it has switched, right? Because there had been so many people that I grew up with that had boyfriend, girlfriends. Now, dude, we talk to our kids on our team, like on our little travel team. I'd say most of them don't or have not.
We got a couple that are hounds.
Yeah,
we got a couple that are hounds, the boys.
Yeah, and
it's funny to hear because they're so naive and innocent, and what they think is going on is not really going on. But it's kind of funny to hear.
It is funny, dude, because honestly, they were probably more like we were, or more like I was, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't classify myself as a hound, but
they're not hounds. They talk about it more than
a lot of other kids,
do.
Right?
Yeah,
and so it is different, but. Getting back to the couples, you got something kind of planned for us to talk about today.
Yeah. So on Valentine's Day, thinking about couples and marriages, and we wanted to go over what we thought were some of the best duos in sports history, right? So we're gonna stick to the big sports, right, and teammates and things like that. So Brian, what are some of the names when I just say duos? Who are some of the best duos that jump out to you?
Well, I go to, obviously, not necessarily our sport, but I would go, Pip and Jordan. Yep. You go to football, you go Rice and Montana, you go Young and Montana.
Yeah. Or Young and Rice.
Yeah.
Young to Montana would have been something really different.
And that would have been, I guess they kind of were, but not really. They weren't connecting with you go Gronk and Brady. So kind of along those lines. Baseball. Do you have guys that I know you mentioned? We talked about this a little bit. You mentioned like Babe Ruth and Garrett maybe together.
And so it was interesting. Like so, the first one that really jumps to my mind when you think of kind of a duos. So the first thing, honestly, that popped to my mind, because in baseball, the two areas on the field that have the most connection are pitcher catcher.
Yeah.
And then up the middle, your shortstop and second baseman.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about who are some of the greatest shortstop. And the one that immediately jumped to my mind was Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell from basically the 1980s Tigers. And not like super heralded, but man, Trammell's in the Hall of Fame. Lou Whitaker should be. But those two. And then I remember kind of Robbie Alomar was a second baseman, but kind of bounced around for a couple, played with the Jays, the Indians.
Yeah.
And then the Orioles. But with the Orioles, it was him and Cal Ripken. With the Indians, it was him and Omar Vizquel. I was like, ooh, man.
Yeah, that's pretty
So,
good.
again, those are ones that, in baseball at least, and then from a pitcher-catcher perspective, I'm sure there was a lot of guys out there who had, Greg Maddux had Eddie Perez, and there was a lot of guys who had their personal kind of catcher, but there wasn't anybody that really stood out to me.
There were none really outside of just teammates. Maybe guys who were teammates for long periods of time.
Well, then like the other one I thought was Kurt Schilling and Randy Johnson, like the Diamondbacks. But some of this too is, I think there has to be some longevity to it.
Yeah, and some success.
Yeah, well, that's where Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, right? And they're kind of the odd couple because Babe Ruth was like this gregarious, outgoing, bigger than life, and did all the things on the field. Right, was set the home run record.
Had fun off the field.
Had great fun off the field.
Yeah.
Lou Gehrig was like polar opposite.
Yeah.
Right, kind of introverted.
Did everything right on the field.
Did everything right on the field. It was actually when they both retired was second all time in home runs. Right.
Yeah.
Great averages. Obviously played in the most games ever consecutively until Kyle Ripken broke it. So. It's almost like a marriage, right? You've got one person who's a little more out there, and then the other who's a little more reserved, but they balance each other out. And obviously, batting third and fourth in the lineup, they were just maybe two of the best ever, or the best ever. Right?
I do kind of think you can't have same personality, right?
Yeah.
At least in those duos. Sometimes, like marriage duos, you think I think opposites do attract.
Yeah.
But I do think there's challenges as you been married longer and longer.
Because
you are kind of who you are,
yeah.
Right? But within sports duos, you think about Jordan and Pippen. Pippen understood that he was number two, right?
He was always Robin. He was never Batman. Yeah, and then he became Batman
for a year,
year and a half or whatever. Yeah, then Jordan came back for the playoffs, and
then he kind of tried to afterwards, right?
Houston, when he went to Houston,
when he went to Houston, and so. There's only so many guys that can really be that alpha. And then you think about, Brady and Gronk. Brady could have been that with anybody, right? I mean, you think about Brady and Gronk.
Well, it could have been Aaron Hernandez. But I mean,
it would have been. It arguably would have been.
Right? And he had his own issues, right? But
when killing people is frowned upon.
That's, yeah. But Brady and Gronk, they're a great one because they had such success. And then they go to Tampa.
And
Brady pulls them out of retirement, right? It's like, oh, geez, like that's a...
It's interesting, though. I mean, again, I would say those guys are two different personalities. They talk about Gronk never watched film, but they also, I think I'd heard some of the guys talk about he's really sharp. He sees something one time, he can. I think he plays this role.
I think that was just perception.
Goofy,
that was the
jock, but it's super high intellect. If I was guessing,
I think that was just the Gronk of it all. Like I think he legitimately watched. I think he clearly cared. He knew the things. But the perception was like, oh, big dumb meathead. And
so are we ranking these, or what do you think, Paulie? I mean, I think you almost got to take Jordan and Pippen off the list. I think they're in a class of their own.
Well, I think honestly, let's just go over a few and give some thoughts on. Like, hey, who had a better marriage? That's kind of what you're saying. But there's
usually some fruit that indicates that.
Yeah. So speaking of fruit, right? Outside of Jordan and Pippen, the first one for me in basketball that jumped off was Kobe and Shaq. I mean, you want to talk about kind of opposite kind of guys, like Kobe. And Kobe's name has come up a little bit in the news recently because Dallas, when they traded Luka, they said they wanted somebody in that mold of Kobe who's a gym rat, who is just singularly obsessed with winning. And that's not Luka. Like that's not his persona.
No.
But I mean, Kobe, like the Mamba mentality, that whole thing is.
And really, he took it from Jordan. He really just copied it. And I would say.
And it takes a special person to do
I was going to say, it was so hard, and we see it in today's athletes too. Like, so early, coaches, and I see it with my son playing football, and he played some really talented kids in middle school football. And even then, the kids on some of the opposing teams that you could tell were talented, bigger, stronger, faster, like they're kind of stretching on their own.
Yeah.
They're kind of not running the drills full.
Yeah.
No.
Or less mature. Sorry.
I would say being treated differently because of their talent. And so I think that's what happens really early. And so you get these super talented kids that haven't always had to work to be the best.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to have a kid that's super talented and super hardworking. That's the balance of raising an athlete, right? Is you need them. They got to have some God-given talent, right? Yeah. But you also got to work, especially if you're talking about a skill sport about baseball, but really any sport, you got to work.
Yeah.
And so that's what made both those guys, and really all of these guys, for so long, like Vince Carter, if you just looked at athlete to athlete, he was the one that was most comparable to like Jordan, from jumping out of the gym, being really creative, being really fluid with how his body worked, could shoot, could move. Going to North Carolina, a lot of similarities, right? And great player. And played forever, but never kind of got to that standard where he truly just carried a team and kind of was the reason that somebody won or lost.
He was a piece of the puzzle.
He was a piece of somebody's puzzle.
Yeah.
And so it takes a really exceptional person and to be able to be super talented, super hardworking, super competitive.
Yeah. And that was the knock on
that.
Shaq from that as well, right? Was Kobe was this guy who was always in the gym, watching film, trying to learn different post moves, work on his three. And Shaq still worked hard. Like there's no denying he was,
right.
But he was also 7'2", 7'3", had some physical advantages that other people,
especially during that time frame, could really take advantage of.
And then he started doing movies. He had his rap albums. Like he was doing some other things, right? That took the focus away. And so eventually that's why he got traded to the Heat, right? Yeah. And that's where some of that, and both Shaq and Kobe after said, like, we were just both immature. We wished, like, man, we won 3 in a row. We could have won 6 in a row. We could have won 7. Like, if those two, because the Lakers ended up coming back and winning one. The Heat won one with Shaq and Dwayne Wade, right? That became his running mate. But so that's another marriage, right? LeBron and Dwayne Wade. And
pretty short. It's kind of weird, you know.
Well, that's why I think some of these. That's why longevity and playing together for a handful of years, it really matters, right? It really makes a difference.
Hey, let's just go to that. It's kind of weird with LeBron, right? I mean, he has he's been mobile, right? And he has every right to be. But it's kind of weird. Started Cleveland, didn't have any choice there. Pretty successful. Goes to Miami, wins.
Back to Cleveland.
And then to Los Angeles. It's kind of unique to where, obviously basketball is different, where the players have a lot more power to do what they want to do. But he never has played for guys for like 6 or 8, 10 years. It's always been these 4 or 5 year stints or 3 years or less. And it's kind of
maybe unique. He's got to figure it out. Because so Kevin Durant's name's been up in the news a lot about that. And Kevin Durant's one of the 20 best players of all time. He's in the conversation.
Yeah,
right?
And if you just take his talent, dude, 7-foot guy, jump out of the gym, shoot threes, move like a guard.
Yeah, does it all. But he's never been. Yeah, he won the championship with the Warriors. Yeah, but he's never been like the lead alpha taking control. And he's bounced around to a lot of different.
And you just wonder. I don't know. It's just such a unique deal to where you see so much talent and it just doesn't always mix. Anybody? I mean, we mentioned the ones that just come to mind. I know you have a list and you have a better memory. Which ones come to mind?
So again, going back to basketball and the Stockton to Malone.
Oh, for sure, that should have been mentioned.
I mean, no better assist man and Malone the mailman. Just delivering the whole time. That one was I think that was a layup. That one. Let's go to college. So I think college is a little tricky because. Again,
it is only 4 years.
You're not there for but a couple come to mind for me. Those Trojans teams from USC. You had Lindell White and Reggie Bush. Yeah, they had a catchy nickname. I can't remember what it was. But it's so catchy I can't remember it. But hey, let's go back. Let's go back to late '80s. Let's go back to late '80s basketball. Your school, Brian, the Wolfpack of NC State.
Yeah, Fire and Ice.
And Ice. Chris Corciani and Rodney Monroe. And that was right when I was getting into basketball and ACC basketball specifically. So I don't have any really great memories of those two.
And I wasn't a fan of NC State then.
But you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I remember kids in elementary and middle school wearing Fire and Ice T-shirts. Yeah. Like it was just the coolest thing in the world. And that was so those two and Corciani when he got done playing was the all-time assist champion of the NCAA. Right. And so he was clearly really good, and Monroe was the benefactor of a lot of those passes. So that was going on. And I think so basketball clearly has a lot. In football, it feels like it's a lot of times a quarterback, receiver, tight end. Yeah. The other one that comes to mind too is Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison.
Oh yeah, for sure. That much
again just played together for a long
and a lot of success in it. But again, different personalities. I feel like both hardworking, but it does take some mixture of personality to be able to have some longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was a couple in hockey that like the ones that just a couple that jump off the page. Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier from like the early Oilers days and winning a bunch of titles. And then into the 90s, the Penguins kind of took from that was Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr were the two big names.
And I know those names.
Because you played a lot of NHL '94.
Yeah, which is a phenomenal game. Well, maybe best hockey game ever.
Yeah. What about, do you remember Billy Crystal's movie, 61?
I remember it, obviously.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Barry Pepper played the role of Roger Maris. Looked just like him.
Yeah, I thought he did a really good job. His hair was falling out.
But that was, so Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris.
And you don't necessarily put those two together, or I didn't. Obviously, we weren't around, but there's just
that was
outside of that
late
movie,
50s, early 60s.
But it's kind of unique to where we didn't even have free agency then, so you were limited on what you could do. I mean, teams essentially owned you once they owned you.
And they traded you, if they wanted to. Yeah. You mentioned one the other day that I thought was interesting. So, two players that were not teammates, but essentially brought baseball back. Right? There's been documentaries, and then they were vilified and cast from society. So,
well, one changed colors altogether.
He has now, yeah.
You don't see that often.
Really,
you see Michael Jackson and you see Sammy Sosa.
Yeah, actually, I was listening to a podcast about Usher the other day, and Usher apparently had bad acne in middle or as a 15, 16-year-old, and he said he bought some sort of cream and put it on his face, and he said it started turning him white. And so maybe that is the thing.
I mean, there may be a cream. I'm not, usually with my complexion, it's generally trying to get darker, right? You used to get sun, and even my daughters, they'll use the self-tanning or whatever lotion. Yeah. And so we're usually not trying to get lighter. But it is Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. He was kind of the Dominican hero, and he was letting Mark was the American hero when they come back and they had that home run chase. And it was, if you didn't watch games, you were watching ESPN to see who hit one.
1998 was bananas. And there's several documentaries on it now. I think ESPN did a 30 for 30 on it. And there's a lot. But I was in Beloit, Wisconsin at that time. And we went to Old County Stadium to watch a Cardinals game that year. We saw McGwire hit one off the top of the wall. And I was like, oh, and he was. This was a couple months into the season. He was kind of tracking, and people were following it. And I remember, was like, oh, man, what if he hits 60? That's that ball right there was 2 feet away from being a home run and that sort of thing. And then he blows away and hits 70. But I get to see a Cubs game at Wrigley that year as well.
With Sosa. And a lot of times he'd run out with the American flag, the little American
flag. Right? Yeah. Man, those guys were so beloved for that year and a couple years after. And
well, it's kind of interesting. I don't know what Sosa was taking, but I remember seeing in the locker room Mark McGwire taking an Andro that was technically it
was legal. Yeah.
Legal GNC type purchase.
I used it back in the day.
So you did. So you were a steroid user. You would have tested.
Well, I used Andro. It was still legal. Guys were talking about it. It was something that.
Wow. So yeah, by the time I came out in 2002, they had guys
I used it in the off season, my first and second off season, because it wasn't. You literally go to GNC.
That's right. And you felt like, at least by the time I had gotten drafted, we were very aware. I think it was starting to be whispers that stuff that you buy at GNC still will fail you in drug tests. But I think there was a long period of time you thought, well, if I get a GNC, it's not something that's going to test me positive.
Yeah, it's not shady. It's clearly
you thought somebody, FDA or somebody had looked at it, and but that wasn't the case. And so I think there's been a lot of guys over the years that were taking stuff from GNC that got popped. And then I think there were a lot of guys that those B12 shots weren't B12 shots.
No, something different for sure, yeah. So I actually did, I don't know if I share on this, but I've actually failed I failed a drug test in 2003. No,
you have not shared it. I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So 2003, failed a drug test. So Ben Sherrington was the Red Sox player development guy at the time. So you never get a call from the player development guy unless you're moving up, moving down.
Yeah.
And I wasn't pitching well enough or bad enough to do either at the time. So I was like, that's bad. So I call him back, and he goes, hey, Paul, I just saw your outing last night. Good job. Want to let you know you failed a drug test. And I was like, what? I said, man, I don't know what happened. This doesn't make sense. It's got to be something wrong.
But you sound like everybody else, even though you're not guilty.
No, clearly. Yeah. And so he's like, well, you tested positive for pseudoephedrine. And so it was Sudafed.
Yeah.
So I'd taken 4 Sudafed because I was congested, and I was like, oh, Sudafed, but it triggered whatever it was.
Because ephedra had been outlawed at that point.
Yeah, and at the time you had 3 strikes essentially. So that was my first, and I was like, So at first I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't care. And then got back and talked to my wife. She's like, well, like that's a mark against you. Like if you get another, then you may be suspended for a little bit. And then I was like, yeah, that is not really. And so I was like, all right, look here. So I went and I called him back and I talked to the trainer. I was like, look, I'll take a pee test every day from here on out. Like I can't have that on my record because if something stupid like
if
that.
If I have to do steroids to get to the big leagues, I want to have the options.
I want to have all my options. But it was funny because at the time, like other guys were taking like legit greenies. And
they were still even when I was rolling through.
And guys were just, and so it was kind of like a clubhouse joke because I was the guy leading like the team Bible study.
Right, you didn't go out,
and I didn't go. Like everybody knew, like
you were close to getting married.
I was already married. Yeah, I was married for a couple of years. Like, so everybody was like, "Oh, geez, like Stu, like you're, God, just what are you pushing today?" But,
yeah.
What drugs you got on you? Hey, meet me over here in the corner.
That's hilarious. So I didn't know you ever failed a drug test.
So so I technically failed one, but again, it was for.
So did they let you take a pee test every day, or did they leave that one strike on you?
So I took one for like the next week. And then they all came back negative, that sort of thing. So it didn't. I don't know if I don't know where. You always hear at elementary school you're a permanent record. I was like, I don't know where this permanent record is. I don't know who kept track of that.
That's interesting. Those tests obviously, ruined and kind of. I don't want to say ruined. I guess in a lot of cases it justified what people suspected, but there was definitely impacts of those tests. And technically in the big leagues for the longest time. If you made it to the big leagues, you could essentially do steroids because they weren't testing it. Even though it's against the law.
Not at all. And that was kind of a running joke. It was like, oh man, I hope I get there.
If you can just get there, then you can, because you saw a lot of guys that were kind of skinny or obviously a ton of talent. Yeah. But you saw a lot of guys back in that time frame that would all of a sudden get to the big leagues and they look like young guys, and then literally 3, 4, 6 months later, they all of a sudden filled out, and it's like, dude, how's that possible?
Well, that was always the other thing with Sammy Sosa. They show that the old Leaf baseball card of him with the White Sox and kind of a skinny guy, and same thing with McGuire. You look at him when he first came up in '87.
I wonder, McGuire. He was such a big human. And one we haven't mentioned is the Bash Brothers.
The Bash Brothers, McGuire and Jose Canseco, who I've not read the book Juiced, the one where Canseco basically just started.
Naming names.
Yeah. But that one will be I'll add it to the summer reading list. I got an ever-growing list, right?
You'll have a ton of time in the summertime to do all this.
Coaching ball.
Read books, do podcasts.
Yeah. But that was a fun one growing up because they had a moniker, right? The Bash Brothers and a name, and people were. I remember around that time for Christmas one year, my mom got me. It was an autographed card of McGuire and Canseco together, and there it was autographed. So that was one of my favorites.
You still got it?
It's actually over here on this. Hold on.
Very cool. That's really cool, though.
All right, so I actually had it on I got a little shelf over there with some old.
I wouldn't take it out.
I'll take it out. It's fine. What am I gonna do with it? So there it is for the people watching on YouTube. There's the old McGuire and Sosa.
Both signed.
Card,
looks mint.
It probably grades out like a 5 or something out of 10. Yeah. I don't know how they do that stuff,
But dude, that's
I don't know if I've ever physically touched this. It's been a while. That was exciting. Look at
that. I would say, Canseco first 40-40. He's a unique character from standpoint that he was kind of a villain, and then man,
I was
hero.
watching that '89 World Series, the Game 4 of the Giants and A's, and he was a heel, man. He was a wrestler. Like he was out there, people were booing him. He was kind of smirking.
Yeah, and he embraced it.
Oh, he loved it.
And then he kind of took that and kind of exposed what the realities were of how many people were on it, and people kind of hate him. Now he's kind of a lovable character. You know, like you hear him talk, his honesty, kind of set him free a little bit. It was just he's a very entertaining person to listen to because he just says kind of what he thinks. And
he was literally the best baseball player in the world.
Yeah, like first 40-40 guy.
Yeah, so he's got some ground to stand on. And
had a twin brother.
Ozzy Canseco, yes.
So kind of, I would imagine that would be frustrating. Like
to be Ozzy,
to be like DNA, same for same. One guy
is literally the best player in the world. Dating Madonna. Yeah.
Yes, and then you have Ozzy. That's kind of a up and down guy.
He made it to the big leagues.
He made it to the big leagues, but he wasn't like.
He wasn't Jose.
Yeah, but essentially the same DNA.
Well,
right,
exactly.
raised in the same. I mean, it's just kind of
maybe
weird.
Ozzy stayed away from the steroids, though. Maybe. That's
well, that's fair too.
Maybe I don't know. I'm speculating.
I feel like he would have shared it with his twin brother. You know,
you hope so.
There? But maybe morally, he was like,
you shared a womb, might as well share your steroids, right?
That's right. I mean, I would think so.
Yeah. So, well, thank you all for listening today. That was our Valentine's Day special to you. We hope you enjoyed that. So. Make sure you're continuing to like and subscribe on all the podcasts and on YouTube and all that. It really helps us out. Hey, throw some comments in there as well. If you're listening on Apple Pods, give us a 5-star rating. We'd appreciate that. And
all 5-star.
All 5-star. If you're thinking of anything else, don't do it.
Yeah.
So otherwise, we hope you all have a great sports day. We'll talk to you soon.
Out. Go Pack.